What's up, nerds? Today I have the absolute pleasure to hang out with comic book legend, published author, and co-creator of Deadpool, Fabian Nicieza. First of all, I just wanted to point out, you and I have a lot in common. First and foremost, we went to college for the same thing.
Okay.
I started out in PR and marketing and advertising and stuff. Second, we both have books well reviewed on goodreads.com. Yay, us.
Yay, us.
Yeah.
It'd be nice if that also translated to better sales, that's for sure.
Preaching to the converted, my friend. Absolutely preaching to the converted. Like, no one's ever even heard of my book. It's fine. Third, we both have unpronounceable last names. So there's that. My last name is Sanssouci, and it's a super French name, which is weird because we found out my family's not French.
Say it one more time.
Sanssouci. And it doesn't,
wow.
It didn't even exist. I know, because there's only 33 people in the world with that name, and we're all related because it didn't exist.
Wow, you're like, you are definitely, you got one up on me. The last time I looked into it, there was only 144 Niciezas on the planet.
Really?
And you only have 34. Which is phenomenal.
Some have died, so it's probably down to 27. But hi, nice to meet you. How's your day going so far?
So far, today's been pretty relatively mild.
It looks absolutely beautiful where you're at.
Right now,
the greenery.
It's not bad. It's not bad. It's in the high 70s, and there's a breeze. I'm on a screened-in porch, so in nicer weather, I tend to come out here with the dog and try to work back here. And as long as there's no lawnmowers or leaf blowers going at it, it's a pleasant place to be.
Mine goes with me everywhere too. He's got his own easy
mine's
chair.
laying down in the corner somewhere right now.
He's not even interested. He's just like, whatever. I'm gonna lay in my chair.
Mine's actually, when I do one of these, she knows enough to know that means I'm not going to be playing with her. So that's all she cares about.
Him too. Like, as soon as if I move Darth Vader this way, he's like, he knows that something's up. Something's up, and he's not interested whatsoever.
On that stupid flip box often enough, but when he's talking into the stupid flip box, then forget about it. Then it's all over for her.
I tried to tell him, like, dude, I am talking to a comic book legend today. He helped create Deadpool. Like, he programmed Deadpool software, and he just looks at me like, whatever.
Yeah, that line works as well on my dog as it ever did on my kids. So
right. I will say, for my kids, though, this is the first time they've ever been impressed.
Oh, good. I appreciate that. Play it back to them and watch them quickly become unimpressed.
Because it's mom's face and voice, right? They're like, I don't care. It's mom. If mom can do it, who cares?
Yeah, like, he's an old geezer wearing a polo shirt. Ew.
Now, my oldest is 24, and I texted them and I was like, hey, Ashton, this is what I'm doing tomorrow. And he's like, what? Like, for the first time, I get that. What? I saw one interview where you were talking about your son came home. He was like a sophomore in
middle school. It was middle school. When he came
middle
home.
8th grade. And he was like, have you heard of Deadpool? And you're like, yeah.
Yep. Yeah.
But you can ask me how. It's like, no.
And it was a couple weeks later when he came home, having realized that I was, involved in co-creating the character, because his friends had looked it up on Wikipedia and said, his last name is the same as yours. That's weird. It's not a common last name. And he's like, that's my father.
It's not exactly the Smith of Argentina. So
yeah,
chances are, you got your start in advertising. When you started working for Marvel, you were doing stuff like Spider-Man balloons, and
Yeah,
you were
yeah,
doing
and I
promotions.
technically, I got the opportunity to do advertising as a result of working at Marvel, because my first
Mhm.
job at Marvel was in the manufacturing department. That was only for about 4 months before I was able to move over to the the then non-existent promotions and publicity department, which
Right.
became a department right after I got hired with other people, getting hired and consolidating some aspects of the company together. This was '86. So I went to college for public relations and
Mhm.
advertising, but I didn't get a job at an ad agency out of college because I couldn't type professionally, which is apparently all the requirements you need to work in an
Yeah.
advertising office at entry
Just do what
level.
we say. Just type what I told you.
Yeah, so I
Yeah.
ended up getting a job in book publishing at Berkeley Publishing. Putnam Berkeley was a hardcover, softcover sister companies, and I worked for Berkeley Publishing for a couple of years before I found out about a job opportunity at Marvel. I'd interviewed at Marvel in DC out of college. I just didn't get either job because they were looking to hire someone with a little more experience than entry level out of college. But eventually I got a job at Marvel, and that was basically the reality is that's the only reason I probably have a career as a writer, because I don't know really whether if I'd been on the outside look trying to get in that I would have been able to have done it. Being on the inside back then made all the difference in the world because I was able to I was able to get to know the editors and understand what needed to be done, and get to sell my stories through the inside. It's incredibly harder to do it from the outside looking in.
Oh, absolutely. But why why Marvel? Why was DC and Marvel like one of your first stops out of
Well,
college?
I because I grew up reading comics my whole life, basically
Mhm.
since I came to this country. At 4.5, 5 years old, I was already reading comics. Learned how to read and write English faster because I was reading comics. My older brother uh, got me into it, so we would get them together. He'd get his, I'd get mine, and we just share. And I always loved the medium, and
Mhm.
I also, coming out of college in the early '80s, I saw the growth of the direct market and the growth of the companies acting as more as professional publishers. Certainly Marvel, but even DC acting more as full scope um, full scope creative publishers made me think about it from a business standpoint. Like there's a job opportunity here, there's advancement opportunity here. So the fact that it's Marvel, and the fact I also absolutely wanted to write at some point, I wanted to get a chance to write, and I always thought that it'd be easier to do it from the inside. If I hadn't left Berkeley, I would have started trying to write manuscripts for their series books. They had
Mhm.
Western and spy novel series books that was published under a pseudonym, and different people wrote the manuscripts because they came out monthly. So I would have done that, and I think I would have had an opportunity to sell some of that, and that might have led to selling my own novel back then, you know.
Mhm.
But I just wanted to work for Marvel or DC because I loved comics. I thought it was writing I wanted to do. It was writing I thought I could do well if given the chance. And most importantly for me back then, it was a good job in a good environment with room for growth. And when you're in your 20s, that's what you got to be looking for. You know,
Right.
if you can find a good job in a good environment that has room for growth, and you're in your 20s, then you kind of it's kind of stupid not to try to take advantage of that. You know.
It's something you were passionate about, like, it's something you actually liked,
Yeah, I
and when
cared
it's
about it a lot. I cared about it too much, quite frankly. In hindsight, now that I'm older, you put things in perspective, and you grow and you learn, and you realize that the amount of emotional energy that you put into a job or into a company is
Mhm.
never reciprocated by the company.
No.
The company as a non-human entity thinks that if they pay you, that's enough, and if they pay you a lot, that's more than enough, you know. But the company, I learned the hard way being at Marvel in the 10-year cycle I was there on staff, especially after it was purchased by greedy scumbag billionaire Ron Perlman, you can keep that in the edit. As soon
I
as
will.
as soon as he owned the company, you started to realize really, really fast the difference between people who are fine making money, are fine selling product, and care about the company versus people who just want to make money by selling product, period.
Like David Zaslav.
And you take the care out of the equation, the product could be a Snickers bar, and it could be a Rolling Rock beer, and it could be a Marvel comic. They don't care. They don't have that connection to the material that we're putting out. They don't have that connection to the audience, to the retailers at all. So they just want to steamroll everything in order to make money. So it was a really valuable lesson I learned. I was only in my early 30s at the time. It was a bit of a disheartening lesson, but it was a valuable one because it really put into perspective the rest of my writing career, unfortunately, which means never trust the company. You can work with the company, you can even work for the company in certain instances, depending on the nature of the job, but never trust them.
Right. I agree with you. And I agree with you about being that age. I think when we're in our 20s, early 30s, we all tend to take ourselves entirely too seriously.
Yeah.
We have that very selfish mindset of me. Why is this happening to me? Why don't they see me?
Yeah.
And then you forget you ain't shit.
Yeah. Even I'm working on product that is making the company, oh geez, I don't even want to know, 10 million a month and 8 million a month in revenue.
Basically made up words amount of money.
And I'm making that level of money for the company. Doesn't matter though, ultimately. And look, there were lots of instances, because I tended to buck the system a lot. I tended to buck the trend and the expectations a lot. I always did it within the context of trying to be very fair-minded about the balance between pushing too much and not pushing at all, so I didn't really make enemies there. To some people I was a pain in the ass, but to other people I was just a passionately strident, go-getter. You know what I mean? So
I do.
They accommodated me a lot. They did. The higher ups, the editor-in-chief and the publisher, even the president of Marvel, they accommodated me a lot for the amount of whining I did, because all of them understood, A, I was making them money, I was making the company money, but B, that my whining came from a place of caring. It wasn't necessarily, it wasn't selfish whining. It was, how do we make us better? How do we make this better? And I've always been a team sports guy, and I learned really quickly when I got to Marvel Comics that the comic book industry has a bit of a surfeit of team players. They have a lack of an employee base, whether that be on the creative side or administratively, editorially. They have a lot of people who never played team sports, never participated in those kinds of team activities.
Nerds.
Don't really quite understand how to work with people that have different opinions toward a goal. And I wasn't like that. I was always a loud pain in the ass, but I also was always part of a team. I played shortstop in softball. I'm like in the middle of the infield. I'm like, my whole life I played either third base or shortstop in baseball. I played in midfield in soccer. I mean, so I just had a very different mentality. And I'm not saying that there was no one there who understood that notion, because there certainly were, just not enough of them.
Right.
It's an industry that is really made up of a lot of kind of slightly social outcasts, slight loners, slight insecure aspect to them. It especially back then in the 80s, it really was kind of like the pimply faced kid grows up to get a job at Marvel Comics kind of a thing, and I had pimples, sure, but I was never a pimply faced kid. So I just sort of tried to navigate my way through all of that. And I still find it to this day. It's still It's still an industry. The creative arts is an industry that is really, really dependent on the insecurity of the creators. Um, so, so,
That's for sure.
so it's hard to navigate that, while at the same time it's easy to see the traps that people fall into. Like, it's easy to see in advance the traps that a lot of people fall into,
Hmm.
because you understand their nature, and you understand the nature of what we're dealing with.
Right. Right. I know exactly what you're talking about. What you're talking about, the not understanding team sports and being a team player and stuff. That's something I see a lot today, just in general with the next generation
Yeah,
that's coming up.
yeah, I
Like
think,
we didn't.
yeah,
That's the participation trophy
yeah,
generation. Like they were told you're doing great no matter what they're
no
doing.
matter what they're doing. Yeah,
Right. And
yeah,
so they don't know how to work with someone else to, what's the word I'm looking for? Compromise.
compromise
No,
and cooperate. Yeah,
exactly. Those are
yeah,
the words.
yeah,
Words are hard.
yeah.
Um,
But the irony is, like, the comic
yeah.
book industry is predominantly made up of people who didn't even get participation awards because they didn't participate.
No.
they didn't. They couldn't even get those freebies. They didn't get the automatic
No.
ribbon.
And these new generations, like the, I'd say Batman 89 was really the turning point when things that us nerds were really precious of and passionate about started becoming mainstream.
Hmm.
All of a sudden this stuff is cool. It's mainstream now. It's mainstream pop culture. And these new generations of kids that have come out that have become comic book and comic book movie mostly comic book movie fans,
Yeah,
they don't understand this was a subversive culture for us growing up. This was something you had to really, really love if you were going to talk about it publicly because you got made fun of.
yeah,
You
yeah.
you
You got
were a
made fun of,
pariah.
and as a result, and you also didn't have as many people that were publicly involved or engaged in the hobby. So rarely did you have too many school friends or whatever who you knew were also
Right.
comic book collectors. And in the pecking order of social pressure and peer pressure in middle school and high school, some of those people weren't necessarily ones that was cool to associate with. So you didn't associate with them for all the wrong reasons that we do when we're kids.
Yeah.
So it was all there. I mean, my brother and I collected comics. I knew one guy in my grade who did, and he knew one guy in his grade who did, and that was it. You know, and that was it. We had no comic book shop. We just had, like, to bike ride the 7-Elevens in order to find what we were looking for.
Well, you mentioned your brother, which reminds me, well, I'll take this opportunity, so to speak. I have a little brother. He passed 11 years ago,
I'm
but
sorry.
oh, it yeah, that just sucks. But it's been 11 years, but it still sucks. But we were really close, and we really bonded over X-Men. Really Star Trek and X-Men.
Hmm.
And if I know he's got to know right now that I'm talking to you. He's around, but if he were here to tell me, to comment on it, he would be so freaking stoked. He would be so impressed. But X-Men, especially the animated series, because we were kids, you know, when that show came out, that really encouraged us to read more X-Men comics like Executioner Song. Come on. That's amazing. We really bonded over that. You have provided something for people like me and my younger brother, Steven, to bond over and make memories for the rest of our lives and then pass those stories and stuff down to our kids. You created yourself immortality, basically.
I
You
appreciate that.
it's true. I love talking to creatives. That is my favorite thing in the world to do. I love talking to special effects artists, writers. I'm a creative myself, but I love talking to creators because there's one one commonality despite all the differing personalities and levels of success. There's one common thread between all of us, and that's we don't think we've accomplished shit. We don't think we've really done anything,
I was just
you
gonna
know.
I was just gonna move away from your kind praise into talking about how that's how I feel about the creators who came before me that I grew up reading and got to meet.
Exactly.
I don't, I never found that comfortable, and I encounter it all the time, and I truly appreciate it because I see it all the time at conventions on a regular basis. Ultimately, my response is that for us, the emotional touchstone, especially with comics, is like between ages 10 and 16. So for
Mhm.
us, no matter who we are, the creators that we were reading and following when we were between the ages of 10 and 16 is normally the kind of the anchor by which our entire love of the medium is kind of grounded. And that's why I feel like, if I got to work with John Romita Sr. at the Marvel offices for 10 years. That to me is mind blowing. I got to work with Stan Lee a bunch of times and engage and involve with him a bunch of times. Getting to meet and know Jim Starlin, that to me is like, phenomenal because I still have that same exact connection to them through the comics I read when I was between the ages of 10 and 16, which
Yeah.
is why I
Like,
don't feel I should ever qualify for that kind of
well, here, let me
attention.
what I was gonna the point I was driving at, which I'm a talker too, okay, and I get way off in the weeds. So, but the point I was attempting to drive at, you create something that families are doing together, siblings are doing together, friends are doing together, and then later for the rest of their lives, they have memories attached to that bring them joy and a sense of connection and completeness. And no matter what happens from now until forever, no one can take that away from you. That is recorded history. It is there forever. You have immortality through the lives of these other people, and that's not nothing. That's not nothing,
Yeah,
nothing at all. So thank
no, and
you
I and
for
I
your contribution to that.
on a macro view, I'm totally aware of that, but on a
Mhm.
micro view, it, it's twofold. Number one, it's a
Mhm.
little bit more than a person of of um of some level of self-awareness and some level of understanding of their own positives and negatives. It's if you're a person of that nature, which I like to consider myself as being, you can't think of yourself up here because
Mhm.
you still got to pick up the
Oh,
dog
right.
crap when the dog takes a poop down here. You know what I mean?
Yes.
I tell stories like, in order to ground myself as much as anything, I'll tell stories like, yes, I go to the Deadpool movie premiere in New York and I get to meet Ryan Reynolds and blah, blah, blah. I still come home on New Jersey Transit train and it still gets stuck for 20 minutes on the way home. And I still have to walk my dog at 12:30, 1 in the morning when I get home. And the dog takes a dump and I got to pick the dump up while I'm
You
wearing
had
the suit that I wore to the premiere. You know what I
you
mean?
had me at you live in
Yeah, well, there. So
Jersey.
I try to divorce myself from the level of connection you're talking about, and I
Mhm.
always divert it purposefully. I always divert it to understanding that level of connection through the creators I am connected to. Like I mentioned, John
Mhm.
Romita, Stan Lee, Jim Starlin, George Perez,
Chris
Jim
Claremont.
Shooter, all of these things.
Mhm.
That I divert it that way because I don't want to think of myself in that manner for someone else, because it just becomes a little too much. The other
Right.
aspect of it, though, is a real one. 99% of the people that you're interacting with are there to connect with you out of an experience from their past, and
Mm.
from their past means it's also from your past. And I am very, very much about moving forward and looking ahead at the next thing I want to do or the
Yeah.
thing I'm working on now.
Yeah.
So the I it's not like, and I try to explain this to people, it's kind of hard to explain. I don't sit here in my house with the dog by my side, looking out at my backyard, thinking about X-Men 32 that came out in 1993. You know what I mean? I'm
Yeah.
thinking about the next story that I want to
Oh, of
work on,
course.
and as a result, the only times that I even engage in talking about things from the past or when I'm at conventions meeting fans or doing these kinds of interviews and podcasts. And it's actually a struggle for me to have to look back at all of that and talk about all of that, but because it's 30 years ago. You know what I mean? Like, and you
Mhm.
were 12. You're not 12 anymore. You know, like I was
Yeah.
12 when I was reading, Barry Windsor Smith's Conan or whatever. I get it,
I
but
have
I
that.
move ahead. I have to move ahead.
Mhm.
More importantly, I have to move ahead for the sake of my ability to perform at my profession and my love
Right.
and my interest in writing. Because I also know plenty of people who are not able to move ahead for for reasons of their own
Mhm.
making or not, which is always sad when that's the case. Either way, and as a result, they're mired in their past, and that's all that exists for them, the work
Right.
they did, not the work they are doing. so
Right.
so i'm pretty I'm pretty adamant about deflecting because I want to focus on next all the time.
Oh, yeah. And that's a great thing. That's the opposite of stagnation, and stagnation is just death. You just
Yeah,
gotta
I
sit
don't.
there and
Yeah,
wait.
I'm 62 years old. I want to give myself
I
another
told
30
you I
years
wasn't gonna
before I
tell
stack.
anyone that.
What?
I told you I wasn't gonna tell anyone that.
No, we weren't gonna discuss that. That means if I'm middle aged, I have to live to be 124.
124.
You had to be nice enough to add the extra 4 years for me in our
I
conversation.
did I did say I wasn't going to tell anyone though, and you just threw it on out there. God, Fabian, work with me, work with me. But no, you mentioned, and of course, this is going to be discussed because you did help create Deadpool. In my opinion, and I don't give two shits what you say, but you created the best parts of
Well,
Deadpool.
look,
And
it's
I
a
said I didn't care what you say.
it's a topic of some controversy
Oh, I'm
for
sure.
others, but certainly not for me,
There
because
you
I
go.
know the truth and I know the lies, and I ignore the lies because they are
And
the they are the lies that need to be told, uh, in order
so
for
others
the
can
people
sleep at
telling them
night.
to feel good about themselves.
Right.
Um,
But that is the thing I appreciate most about you is your candor. Your your inability to let other people dictate you, that you are not afraid to say nope,
yeah,
nope, that's not how it went. And there are not a lot of people in your world that are like that. So I really appreciate that a lot about you. That was my favorite thing about checking out some of your past interviews is you're like, no, actually, Wikipedia is incorrect and this person's incorrect. That is not what happened. You're
yeah, and look,
passionate about the truth, and
it
I appreciate that.
well, I'm passionate about I can't speak to the truth when it doesn't involve me necessarily,
Right?
but I can speak to the truth that I was involved in,
Like you're
and
extremely rational and reasonable human. And
there's a
those are my
reason I
favorite.
call myself the co-creator of the character because
Mhm.
the creator of the character is Rob Liefeld. He created a character called Deadpool who looked like that.
Mhm.
I am the co-creator of the character because I gave him a name, a personality, fleshed out a backstory, which was nothing more than a single
And then
line
you
of
created
text.
Ryan Reynolds' weird science
Well,
style
I also
so that
created Ryan. I also cast Ryan Reynolds in 2004 in
yeah,
the
with
part.
the
Um,
Sharpay,
but
Ryan Reynolds with the
ultimately,
Sharpay.
it's just honestly, it's all just an exercise in masturbation and calling it sex. It's all it is. It's really boring to me. It's really exhausting to me.
Yeah.
I tend to avoid it mostly because I don't care.
Mhm.
The truth is the truth. The legal truth is the legal truth. The
Mhm.
contract says what the contract says, and I get a check every year. So what, anything
Yeah.
other than that is just smoke. That's all it
Well,
is. It's smoke and hot air. So I ignore a lot of smoke and hot air because again, that's a lot of time being spent on yesterday. And I really prefer to try to focus. I'll use yesterday to make my today and tomorrow better. I'm not going to
Mhm.
deny I won't use it for my own financial benefit,
Oh,
but
yeah, that's
but
what it's
by the
there
same
for.
token, I'm also working a lot harder to sell my third book. I'm working a lot harder to help navigate the puzzle pieces of putting a TV show together for Suburban Dicks, my novel. That's what I'm focused on. I'm not focused on who did what Photoshop drawings of sketch art in 1992. I just don't care. Let them have a party.
But I gotta say though, the personality, the wit you gave him is it's made it. He's so unique in that respect. The sarcasm, it's unmatched. Where I
Oh,
know you
I would
wanted
have to
him.
disagree with you, Danny, because I think it was very quickly matched by Mark Waid, and it was very quickly surpassed by Joe Kelly.
Well, I
And
meant him as a character.
oh, okay. I mean,
Him as a character. He's a very unique character, and you knew right away that you guys had struck gold.
yeah, we knew right away that we
You knew
had
right away.
something
You knew
different.
what you had.
Yeah.
I love the tongue in cheek. Like as soon as you look at it, you're like, this is Deathstroke. Like this is Deathstroke. Why don't we just name him Wade Wilson?
But that's all. But again,
He just
yeah, and again,
hilarious.
it's hard to explain to people because people want to make it black and white. It,
Hmm.
it's just there's a difference between doing something as homage. There's a
Yes.
difference between doing something as parody. There's a difference between doing something as an in joke. That was nothing more than an in joke.
Yeah.
That's it. It had nothing to do with
And
the
it's
character's
not like
design.
Marvel and DC haven't
But
had
that's
little
it goes
jokes
beyond
and
that though,
stuff
Danny.
back and forth for years anyway.
But it goes beyond that because the character was described as Spider-Man meets Punisher. His
Hmm.
costume is Spider-Man's costume. His
Yes.
costume is not Deathstroke's costume.
No.
George Perez designed Deathstroke and Taskmaster in the
Hmm.
same year. Taskmaster debuted in Avengers in January, and Terminator debuted in New Teen Titans in December, I think it was.
Hmm.
So in the same year, he just designed characters that had similar conceits. They had
Yes.
weapons. They had ammo packs. Everybody was copying Art Adams. Everybody was copying Michael Golden, and Michael Golden was drawing these GI Joe
And let's
covers.
face it, who George Perez is an absolute legend. He's influenced and inspired so many artists over the years. Like and that's a good thing. It's a good thing to inspire other people.
Yeah,
I've never seen anything wrong with that.
and making it an in joke was purposeful, not for the sake of the reader, not even
Mhm.
for the sake of the character. It was just purposeful for the sake of me and the people who I was working with. That's all it was. Because
Yeah.
especially considering that not a single person, I'm the one who said something about that like 10, 15 years later, I think, when I started writing Cable Deadpool. I think that's the first time that I ever said anything about that publicly. And as usual, the social media's bad game of telephone turned it into he called them that because they were copying Deathstroke, and it became an
Right.
albatross, an anchor around us unnecessarily, unfairly,
Yeah.
and now I actually get angry about it because it's people looking for a simple binary solution to to the creative process, and the creative process is often a hell of a lot more nuanced than that. You know,
Very,
um,
very true.
and for anyone who says that Rob was copying Deathstroke, it's ludicrous. It's ludicrous because it's not accurate.
He
He
doesn't look
was
like
he
Deathstroke.
was drawing from multiple influences that he'd had since he was a kid. And by the way, he was only about 21 when he did all this, so he was still a kid. Like I was only like in my late 20s, early. I was I even 30 by then? No, I don't think I
No,
was
you
even
could
30 by.
no.
So it's just part and parcel of the creative process of absorbing influences as you grow up, things,
Mhm.
especially for artists, things that look
Yes.
cool. They want to draw things that look cool, and young artists want to draw things that look cool. And if you look at any of the GI Joe covers that Michael Golden did with Snake Eyes on it, you see a gajillion different harness packs, you know, et cetera, et cetera. So the influences were all there, and it just kind of coalesced in a positive way with this particular character that, you know, clearly was an overnight success that also took 30 years to become a success. You know what I mean? So it's all, you
Yeah.
know.
I was trying to find information on what really inspired his personality, because you were just saying that, we artists, creatives, writers, what have you, we look for inspiration, whether it's consciously, subconsciously, things influence us. We're inspired by things to create another thing. And you said, and this was probably my favorite part in any interview you've done. You said that right away, Deadpool's voice is Dennis Leary. And you started referencing the MTV commercials. I was like, say no more. I know exactly what you're talking about. You're the black and white ones where
Mhm.
he's smoking. I'm like, yes, that's like, yes. I love Dennis Leary. And as soon as you said that, it all kind of, absolutely. I can see Deadpool singing asshole, like, and just really ripping the hell out of it. That's awesome.
I don't it's funny, I don't often do that with comic
Mhm.
characters that I'm writing. I don't try to reference someone's point of view or tone or anything,
Mhm.
but it, it was weird because I took a shortcut is what it amounted to, because of the amount of work I was doing at the time, and how pressing the deadlines all were at that time. I took a shortcut with that character to find a voice, and the origins of that are he was described to me over the phone by Rob when we were talking about the new characters that were going to be appearing in New
Mhm.
Mutants number 98 as Spider-Man meets Punisher, and
Mhm.
Rob was visualizing it as Deadpool bounces around while Cable, the lumbering tank, is fighting him. So he moves around like Spider-Man. And by the time I had to write the script, which was weeks later, and of course I had to do it overnight because everything had to be done overnight. I needed a shortcut, and the shortcut became he's got the personality of Spider-Man. If Peter Parker were a dark humored evil ass, you know, and that was it. And Dennis Leary was a dark humored evil ass in his shtick, you know.
Yeah.
So that was the shortcut I took, and it worked out really fine for that time period.
Well, I
Um,
wouldn't I wouldn't so much as call it as a shortcut, more as like the universe kind of said, "Here you go. How's this for inspiration?" You're like, "That's it. You're absolutely right." Because
I
you
look at it as a writer's shortcut.
see, and that's that thing. They call it imposter syndrome these days. That you find a way to lessen your contribution or your ability to do something. Not many people. Creativity is not just about totally pulling something out of your ass or out of thin air. Sometimes it's making connections, the
Yeah,
ability to see a connection and make that work.
but it's an interesting conversation because look at how my own thinking evolved on that.
Mhm.
Whereas I don't write the character for 10 years, basically. And in 2004, when I come back to write the character in Cable and Deadpool, I wrote that first issue without having read any of the other work that was done between my last issue of my limited series, Circle Chase, which was
Mhm.
1994, 95, and my first issue of Cable Deadpool, because I wanted to return to the character with my own voice, my own thinking. I did go back and reread that stuff as we went along, but I just wanted to approach those first pages in my own way. And luckily, I realized after the fact that it flowed with what had been done since then. But I knew that I'm writing a character who now has starred in his own book for 100 issues, has a certain level of popularity, is no longer of the villain of the book, which is what he was when I first was writing him, you
Mhm.
know? So I picked an actor to cast him as, who was far nicer than Dennis Leary, far more sympathetic than Dennis Leary, far sweeter and smoother of a voice than Dennis Leary,
Mhm.
but had a sarcastic attitude and a sarcastic intelligence behind it, and that was a young Ryan Reynolds, right? The best thing that could have happened for the character is that it took 10 years for that movie to get made, because Ryan Reynolds kind of aged into the character.
Yeah.
I don't think he would have played as good, nearly as good a Deadpool when he was 29 as he did when he was 39 or 40. So my own thinking of the character evolved because I understood that the character had evolved. So Dennis Leary was a really kind of a dark comedic voice back then.
Yes.
That was the voice I was thinking of for Deadpool. Um, by the time I'm writing him in 2004, I'm thinking of Ryan Reynolds as the voice of Deadpool, and the two of them do not necessarily have similar voices at all. That they might both have really intelligence. They have a lot of intelligence behind their humor,
Yes.
and definitely have an understanding of how to deploy sarcasm, both a weapon and a shield,
Mm.
which is all what Deadpool does. But the tone had changed already. So the Deadpool I'm writing has a slightly different tone in his voice than he did in
Well, it's
1994.
growth. I mean, characters have to grow and change because we grow and change. And without change, that's stagnation. And again,
Mhm.
that's just plain death. I love the direction that he took when you came back and you changed here and there and you compared him to a cross between Ryan Reynolds and a Sharpay. Like that just yes. It's a really excellent change. And you knew it needed to be done. Just just good job, Dan.
Yeah, but thanks. I knew it needed to be done for as much for how I was approaching and thinking of the character now,
Mhm.
as how I might have been thinking about him in the role I wrote him in. I mean, don't forget, like the role, the first year of his appearance is nothing more than a few pages of snippets at a time in an
Mhm.
ongoing subplot in X Force. He doesn't get his own shtick until the first limited series I wrote. And even that was feeling my way through it to understand how to play him as a more positive protagonist in his story while still trying to make him a bit of a heel and a schmuck, find that
Right.
balance. I think we did find that balance in that first miniseries, which really helped set him up for how he would appear later in his own book when Joe was writing him monthly.
Well, and when you're creating a character, it's more of a getting to know this character rather than just sheer invention. At least it was for me. Like writing something, I found myself writing just to find out what was happening next,
Yeah.
find out what this character would
Yeah.
do. So sometimes you're just as surprised as everyone else. So
Yeah, in
it
comics, you don't often get that luxury as much. I now that I've gotten to do a little bit of prose the last few years, I
Mhm.
find that's so much more of a luxury in prose, to be able
Mm,
to explore, in writing avenues you may not stick with. In
mhm,
comics, because of the monthly schedule, the grind, the page count limitations,
mhm,
and I say this in a positive way, the interaction that with the artist, the work is the result of multiple input into the material, not just the writing and the words, but the visualization of that, and then the reinterpretation of your words after you've seen the art.
mhm.
It's different in comics where you don't have that luxury of exploring a character's development, and oftentimes you do that in hindsight. Like in my novels that I've been percolating, there's a few that I've started that I've stopped in the last couple of years
Mhm.
because I wasn't really thrilled with where they were. And I never had that luxury in comics. I could never stop a plot for issue number 97 of Alpha Flight because it had to come out. You know what I mean?
Right.
So I just recently wrote like 40 pages of a book, a manuscript in progress that I kind of knew I wasn't going to ever use. I just wanted to learn more about this character. I wanted to understand her more and get her
Mhm.
voice down. And the only way to do that is to have her talk, have her
Yeah.
interact, have her,
Yeah.
so I did that. And yes, I excised that entire chunk out of the work, because I knew it wasn't necessary. But as a result, I ended up understanding her better now and can write her with more confidence once I started to go down that road, you know?
So tell me about your life as a novelist. Like, does
Oh,
is there a level
I love the
of
sound of that.
life as a novelist?
My life as a novelist.
I wanted to write comics, but I didn't know how. And at that point, I got married very young, had children very young. And so I was focused on that. I didn't have the luxury of like, guys, I'm going to take off to New York and try this thing. I'll be back. But
Hmm.
I
Yeah.
didn't have that opportunity. I ended up writing a book instead. So I didn't really learn the whole comic writing process. But I was able to just sit and free flow, just
Uh-huh.
let it kind of pour out and just go and go. I didn't have a deadline. I didn't have anything that would tell me other than you have to breastfeed this child.
Hmm.
That's important too. That's pressure. But I didn't have things
I
like
didn't have to
corporate
worry about that
pressure.
part while I was writing my my book.
But how is your comfort level with writing a novel compared to the scripting and comic book writing?
My first two books, which was a two-book contract that I was really lucky that my
Yes.
first manuscript had so much interest in it that it became a two-book deal. In hindsight, it also becomes a bit of an albatross, but at the time, it was fantastic. The writing process for my two books were 1000% diametrically different,
Mhm.
and I really preferred the second book to the first. The first
Really?
book, well, because in terms of the writing process, the first book,
Really?
was done out of the desire to do it. It was I hit an age and a place in my life where I was so frustrated and so jealous and so angry to see some contemporaries and peers and even some younger contemporaries and peers
Oh, that's the worst.
publishing books,
That's
and I felt really angry at myself for never having finished a manuscript. It wasn't even about selling it. It wasn't even about making money off it, because at the time that I was doing it, I never once thought that I was going to sell it or that I was going to make money off it. I needed, for me as a writer, to at the very least reach the end on a manuscript, because I'd started many and tossed them so often so quickly because I wasn't happy with what I was seeing. So when I was writing Suburban Dicks, it was not my main thing because it wasn't making me any money. It was not a scheduled thing because I was under no obligations to finish it other than for myself. And I also had a lot of loss in my life that entire year of
yeah.
2018 when I was writing it. And that loss in my life hit at ridiculously cyclical intervals: February, June, October. So every time I got through one loss and started feeling the flow again,
Yeah.
another one happened. I had to get the flow going again. So it took me 15 months to finish the first draft of the manuscript, and it was all over the place, and
Mhm.
it was way too long. It was way too many pages. I knew I had to cut a lot. I cut a lot out of that original manuscript, both multiple levels of input. I hired a freelance editor to look at it, and she gave me great advice, so I cut to that. I was able to get an agent, so the agency gave me notes, and I cut to that. And then when a publisher finally wanted to buy it, I cut more to that. So I cut over 100 something pages from the original Suburban Dicks manuscript. So the process is a weird one because it was so elongated.
Mhm.
On Self-Made Widow, I had a contract, I had a deadline, and I started I got the outline approved in March of 2020. And the weekend we got shut down here in Jersey for COVID, I started typing that Tuesday, I think, because I came home from a convention in Mexico City on a Monday to an empty Newark airport and an empty New Jersey Transit bringing me home. And I basically sat in my house in a corner, away from 4 other adults that were in the house at the time, and I just typed. And it was concentrated effort from March through November, and I finished the manuscript with no dawdling, with no winding paths to go on, with no excessive verbiage, because I'd learned quite a lot from the first book. So I almost nailed my anticipated manuscript page within like 10 pages of what my manuscript page break was supposed to be. And I haven't replicated that yet since, because I haven't sold the 3rd book yet, because I haven't finished the 3rd book yet. My new manuscript is a half manuscript and an outline, and that just went out to my contractually obligated publisher. Putnam has to see it, so that's with them just now, just in the last week and a half. It took me 2.5 years to get to the point where I was writing something that I felt like I wanted to write and would work as a book and could sell as a book. Because I tried 2 or 3 other things that either turned out to be things I didn't want to write, or turned out to be things I wasn't happy with, or
just
things
didn't
I
want to
didn't
be
think,
written.
or things I didn't think could sell. There's a part of that too. Now that I've sold the books, I want to sell more books. I don't.
I know, right?
I'm kind of in an in-between age where I'm getting closer to just writing because I want to write, and then maybe just putting it up online and say, if you want to read this, go read it. And doing it because I want to continue to earn an income off of it. I'm in an in-between stage. I'm probably about 5 to 8 years away from being able to say, I don't care, I'm just going to write it. I got my Social Security check. I got my wife's pension. I'm going to sell the house at a nice big profit. So I can get away with doing it more because I just feel like doing it, rather than doing it because I wanted to have an end goal, a destination, a rack space in a store, So I'm still at the rack space in a store standpoint, because after optioning Suburban Dicks for TV development years ago, and now working on optioning it for a second time for TV development, I also like optioning the ideas for TV development because it's fun. It's fun. It's fun to option it, get the option money, and then watch it all explode and suck.
Oh, yeah, that's just so fun.
Depends on how you look at it.
I guess so. It's all about perspective. But tell us a little about Suburban Dicks, because everyone knows about Deadpool. Tell us about Suburban Dicks.
Well, they're not that far removed from their creative originations. I had the idea for the book in 1995, and the idea came from things that were happening in my real life, which a little bit of it is incorporated into the first book, but not a lot, because it evolved quickly. The idea for the original book was revenge on a gun club that was in the town for 50 years, and new development had been built up behind it, alongside of it. So the gun club ended up having their targets, their outdoor shooting targets, in extended line of sight of residential houses, which hadn't been the case before. And we moved into new construction home in 1993, and besides the fact that we weren't really truthfully told what the noise impact was of the gun club's activities, and you only would have known it if you'd been out there when they were actually outdoor shooting, which my wife and I weren't out there until they were actually outdoor shooting until a Tuesday night, when our skeleton frame was already up in our house, and we heard the gun club shooting for the first time outside. And my wife and I looked at each other and said, "You can't hear a thing," because that's how they sold it to us at the real estate office.
No.
So that being said, though, that's buyer beware, and I get all that. But
Mhm.
buyers shouldn't have to beware that occasionally bullets come your way and land on your driveway or are found in your mulch bed, or one rifle bullet penetrated the screen of my bedroom window but couldn't penetrate the window because it had ricocheted so much. And
Oh.
I was really mad that the police, who had a vested participation in that gun club, because that's where they shot their certification in their indoor range. And the gun club was made up of a lot of old townies, not even that many residents of West Windsor. A lot of other outlying neighboring towns were members of the gun club, and they'd been there 50 years. So it was really the old townies, the farmers and the old townies versus the newbies. This is 1994, 95, where we tried to fight them in the town council, and we lost, trying to get them to restrict outdoor shooting and only have indoor shooting. We lost 5-4 in the town council vote. And
Ugh.
and as a writer, I wanted to get revenge on them, and the way writers get revenge is they come
Yes.
up with stories. It's not actually real revenge. It's not.
Yeah.
It's not even good fake revenge. It's just
Yeah.
a writer's version of
We
revenge.
find ways to make it we make a fictional character based on you, and then we
And then we
stick
and then we
toothpicks under your
trash you. Yeah,
toenails.
yeah. So I came up with a story. What if something happens that is found out about the members of the gun club that is so scandalous that it forces them to close down? That was the original thinking behind the book. And the creative process then evolved into a murder today is tied into a murder that happened 40 years ago. And clearly, if you read the book, you know that the gun club's just a real peripheral part of all of that. It's not
Mhm.
even remotely the focal point of the whole thing. It evolved into a generational conspiracy within members of the township administration and the police department, and that just became a more entertaining way to go. So this was 1995. I had the title Suburban Dicks. I had the two lead characters, and I had the breakdown of the whole story in 1995. And I proceeded to never write it. And the times I did try to write it, I wasn't happy with it, so I stopped writing it. It wasn't until the fall of 2017, where I finally started typing, because I always knew it was a good idea.
Mhm.
I'm not an idea guy. I'm a nuts and bolts guy. So when I have an idea that I think is good, I don't want to lose it. I want to hang
Mhm.
on to it. And I knew this book was a good idea. I knew the characters were a good idea. I knew the story was a good idea. And in many ways, the 25-year wait, or close to 25-year wait, was worth it, because it's a far better book than it ever would have been had I tried to write it in 1995.
Oh,
You know?
yeah, it had, 25 years to gestate
Yeah,
in your head.
and for me to gain greater perspective on it, other than just my desire for vengeance on the gun club being the motivating factor, then it became really about the changes in suburban towns in Jersey,
Mhm.
the fear of the white fear of assimilation and white flight from the suburban towns, because our Asian population in my area has incrementally increased over the last 20 something years. And you watch the houses turn over, and you see the white families who bought their houses in 1990 or 92, and then an Indian family, or Chinese family or Korean family, whatever, buys the house. And uh, it's not that it's any kind of a prevalent problem in the town, as if there's riots going on, or graffiti slurs being painted on people's houses. It's just this underlying simmering current, that you get to try to explore as a writer. So it's absolutely a fictionalized version of the town I live in, but the fictionalization is all based on overboiling the pot, like overbrewing the pot, as it were.
Yeah.
It's stuff that really exists. It's just really kind of exaggerated and exacerbated for the sake of the drama in the story.
Well, and that's what makes the best stories, just like Mark Twain said, write what you know. Write what you experience. It doesn't have to be exactly the same thing, but when you write what you know, it's always better.
Yeah,
Always better.
I find that ironic that you say that because it only took me about 25 years to figure that out. Because I've spent all of my career writing Marvel's New York City and Gotham City and Metropolis and outer space and Atlantis and to get to write the town I lived in was really, really refreshing and
Mhm.
rewarding for me as a writer. I started the book by trying to fictionalize all of it. I tried to fictionalize the streets. I tried to fictionalize the town, and the first 30 pages of my first pass were fictionalized, a fictionalized version of it, and was exhausting me so much. I said, "This is stupid. Why am I fictionalizing this? Just make it what it is."
Yeah.
And I just made it what it is. And so everything, the way I've described it is everything that's described is exactly as it exists, except the second you walk through the door, it's all fiction, you know? So all the stores are real, all the municipal buildings and the parks and all of that is all real. But what happens in them is all fiction, you know?
I really enjoyed talking to you today, and I cannot thank you enough for actually taking the time for some little nobody on the YouTubes
It
today,
is
because
my
that
pleasure. And I thank you for talking about stuff in a fun, interesting, and kind of entertainingly evolving way. I liked it a lot. It was a
oh,
really nice
really? I
change of pace.
appreciate that. I don't really like doing interviews. I like just talking and getting to know people that I respect and admire. I just want to pick your brain so I can, clone you for myself. That's all. That's what this was. Shh. But I really appreciate it. I really had a great time today. And was there anything else you wanted to throw out there? Emotional outbursts?
No, just to plug my new Image comic coming out in
Go
July.
for it.
First issue of Free Agents, co-created and co-written with Kurt Busiek, uh,
Nice.
multi Eisner Award winning Kurt Busiek, and art by Stephen Mooney and color artist Triona Farrell. It's basically a group of interdimensional, a group of young interdimensional soldiers who've known nothing but war their entire lives find themselves stranded on Earth and think that their fight is over, but it's not. Dot dot dot.
Now you
so
have to deal with cancel
it's
culture.
science fiction superhero adventure. First issue is double size, 40 pages for $3.99 with a wraparound cover. Comes out from
Nice.
Image July 3rd. So I hope people check it out. It's different. It's fun for us. We're having a good time doing it.
And frankly, we need some new, fun, interesting, with good story comics these days. I hate to say it, but there aren't that many. It's we need new stuff in the comic world, like actual good new stuff. So
Well,
thank you for that.
it remains to be seen if this will fall into that category, but let's see what time will tell us.
Manifest, baby, and manifest, manifest. You need a white girl with a nose ring to tell you to manifest
I will
this.
manifest its greatness.
Well, thank you so much, Fabian.
My
I
pleasure. Thank
I
you.
really appreciate you. Have a wonderful day in your amazing backyard right
You
there.
too. Time to let the
And
dog out.
yeah,
She's starting to get antsy.
mine already took off.
Oh
He
no, mine's gotten closer and she wants to go out. Like,
Well, I
so
will let you let the dog out.
I appreciate it. Thanks a lot.
All right,
Take care.
thanks
It
a
was a
lot.
lot of fun.
All right,
Bye bye.
bye. That's all I have for you nerds today. Thank you so much for hanging out. If you like the content that I'm putting out there, please do me a huge favor. Make that sacrifice to the YouTube algorithm overlords. Smash that like button. If you're new, I really hope you subscribe and ring the notification bell so you get notified whenever I'm back with more nerdy content. I've been Danny. You've been awesome. He's been Fabian Nicieza, and I will see you in the next one. Make sure to check under your beds tonight because Disney and Kathleen Kennedy are gonna get you.